Will he take it for a snipe himself? Yes! Called to use it now. Called to use it, still there with South Africa. Derlinde almost getting through, still going. It's a repeat effort. That won't be a try. They're coming back. They're coming back. Wayne Barnes says no.
Ken Owens chooses not to argue.
Make it really clear, you come and ask for a yellow card, you get one.
Okay,
understand?
Yeah. Great call there from Wayne Barnes. You come and ask for a yellow card and you'll get one. You might have won World Cups, Mark, but you don't start asking for yellows, not when Wayne's around.
Height. Careful. Go away. I've got it.
For 10 minutes, it's uncontested scrums. They play with 15 men.
You don't need to get involved.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our session this afternoon. I'm Georgina Smith and I look after the distribution and advisor servicing teams at Innate, and thank you so much for joining me today. Whilst you may have enjoyed our Innate webinars before, where we've talked about the complexities of RDR or the intricacies of F&A tools, today's a little bit different because, quite frankly, I fancied a break from PE ratios and fan conversations and thought we'd celebrate the wonderful game of rugby, which seems to be quite important in these parts of the world. As always, there's a bit of housekeeping to do up front. Those of you watching today who want CPD points, and there's 1.5 on offer today, these will be sent out automatically on Monday, as long as you're here for the whole duration of today's webinar. Those of you who aren't watching us live, there'll be some questions at the end which you'll need to complete correctly, which will enable us to send out your CPD points promptly. Now, unfortunately, in these unusual and difficult times, a sector that suffers more than most is charities, who work tirelessly to support the lives of those most vulnerable in our society. So with this in mind, Wayne Barnes, our star guest today, has kindly donated the shirt he wore to referee the third place playoff game in last year's World Cup in Japan between New Zealand and Wales. He's offering it signed or unsigned, with or without sweat stains. So take this opportunity to win your piece of World Cup history, where South Africa reigns supreme. So how do you get your hands on that shirt, and what happens to the money you donate? So during today's webinar and for 24 hours afterwards, we're asking you to bid for the shirt via an online auction for the Connect Sports Academy. This is an academy based in the township of Khayelitsha in Cape Town. And they use the power of sport, particularly rugby, to uplift underprivileged children. Their teams of volunteers run regular mass participation training sessions on any available patch of land and enter many teams of youngsters into touch, mini and youth rugby competitions, both locally and nationally. And since their humble beginnings in 2014, they've helped many girls and boys gain sports scholarships to leading local high schools. They've opened a high performance sports academy and had success in all levels of sport. I mean, most recently, Sesame Shazi, a local 21-year-old lady who progressed from playing centre for the Women's Western Province team through to being the linchpin in the women's blitzbox side. And last year, she was called up to the Springboks to play against Scotland. She attributes all her success to being nurtured by the Connect Sports Academy. So please do give generously. We'll be auctioning this shirt via the Innate Auction app, and you'll see a link to that in your chat now. Please take a moment to register. It's quick and it's easy and simple to get bidding. I know this audience is going to give generously to such a worthwhile cause, so please get going with your bidding. So onto the main gaff. Here at Innate, we thought what better way to celebrate the anniversary of the 2019 Rugby World Cup and South Africa's emphatic win over England to lift the Webb Ellis Trophy than to have an afternoon with three pommies. I'm joined today by two mates of mine from the UK, David Kurk and Wayne Barnes. Not only was David a premiership match official, but he's also a professional MC whose work ranges from comedy at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival to being the go-to match day host for Wasps and running events for thousands in corporates around the world. So thank you for joining us, Kurky. And then he almost needs no introduction at all. He's the great friend of everybody, unless you happen to be on the wrong side, of course. It's Wayne Barnes. And all I need to say is that he's World Referee of the Year for 2019. They're going to give you an insight into the human side of being a referee and a match official, what it's like to be on the front line and in the spotlight week in, week out. They'll be sharing some anecdotes, some great stories, some funny stories, and some serious stories. And I thought this would not only be entertaining, but also relevant to many of you watching today. We've been living in a really strange world for the last 6 months, dealing with adversity, not only in our own worlds, but also listening to clients who suddenly find themselves in difficult situations. We've had to react to what's in front of us with only the information we have to hand, making quick and often big decisions, which can change the course of events in front of us considerably. And that's exactly what a referee does all the time. Because whatever decision he or she makes, they're upsetting 50% of the people playing and watching. No two situations are the same. No two games are the same. You don't always get the textbook answer from the inputs. So what happens when it doesn't go quite according to plan? What do? How do you cope? I can't wait to hear what they've got to say, but as always, these are interactive sessions, so please feel free to post questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and I'll address these at half time and towards the end. So without further ado, over to you, Kurky and Barnesy.
Well, thank you very much, George. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to London and to the Shard, which is where we're coming from, which is actually the tallest building in Western Europe, of 309 meters tall. I say Western Europe, it's only until the end of December, when, of course, we're no longer in Europe. And before we go on, I have to say that George herself, she's hiding her light here. She was an international referee herself of some great repute, and she got there because she was keen to learn. She asked questions. She was really like a sponge, taking in the information to further her career. And I remember well when she was starting out on her career, she came to one regional meeting. She knows where I'm going with this story. She came up to me, she said, Kurky, she said, can you give me some advice? I said, yeah, of course I can. She said, look, one of the big areas of the game I've got a problem with is the scrummage. And I said, well, it's not surprising. It's probably the most difficult area, Barnes, the most difficult area of the game to referee. What is it? Is it the physicality? Tell me what it is. She said, well, the specific problem is when the number 9 has the ball in his hands and he's about to put it in. I think, yeah. I'm trying to get a good view as to whether they put the ball in straight. Well, yeah, of course. But everyone on the touchline gets a great view of my huge arse. So how can I change that? So helpfully, I suggested, diet. So anyway, look, George, it's lovely. I promised I would never tell that story again. Well, welcome, Barnesy. Welcome. It's great to have you here. How are you?
It's wonderful to be out of the house, first of all, as everyone's, I'm sure. I've got a load of friends in South Africa as well, particularly up in Bloemfontein in Jaco Piper, the South African referee. I know there's been a lockdown down in SA as well, but being out of the house and being back in the Shard where my offices are is great, Kurky. Not only am I a referee, I think you know, I'm also a barrister, a lawyer. So as you can imagine, a referee and a barrister are a pretty popular chap.
Well, not just a barrister, are you? Because ironically, you specialize in corruption and bribery, and this is absolutely true. But in South Africa, you would appreciate the fact that his nickname is Mango, because just like the airline, he tends to lose half his cases. But between us, Wayne and I have 93 international appearances. Wayne, how many are you up to now?
92.
Yeah, and therein lies the story, really, of the difference in our proficiencies. But look, for my one and only game, actually, we did work together, and it was for the World Cup in 2007 and the qualifier, and maybe we'll come on to that later. And of course, 2007, a World Cup fortuitously won by South Africa, I would say, in the final. I'm sure that actually it was a try. The TMO didn't give it, but I'm sure. And actually, I've worked out that, it's going to be, next time South Africa wins, it's going to be 2031, because they only win every 12 years. Although, by that same logic, England probably won't win it again.
And Kirky, if I'm honest, I'm glad we're in London and everyone else is in South Africa. You know, really ingratiating yourself to the audience here.
Yeah. If you enjoy this, my name is David Kurk. If not, I'm Austin Healy. Look, and Barnsley, being serious, I'd like to talk to you about your career today in terms of your rugby career, how it started, some of the experiences you had along the way. Now, we've got some clips that we're going to show as well, which will probably help bring some memories back for everyone. But before we actually start on going back, I'd like to begin with the fact that you're one of the only referees to have officiated at 4 Rugby World Cups, which is incredible. And I'd just like to ask you what your memories are actually of the most recent one in Japan.
Yeah, 4th World Cup, you know, started back in 2007. But Japan 2019, so many wonderful memories, I'm sure, for so many people who are listening in today. Japan for me, though, wasn't a country that I'd ever really wanted to go and travel to. You know, I'd been to South Africa, I'd been to Australia, New Zealand, and I really wanted to go to those places. But Japan is a bit too alien for me. And it was going to be 10 weeks away from home, very similar to the players. I had a 5-year-old daughter who was starting school the day that I flew. And I had a 2-year-old son who likes hanging around with his dad. So I was quite of mixed emotions going away, knowing that I wouldn't see my family for 10 weeks in a country which, you know, I wasn't going to be able to switch on to the BBC. I wasn't going to be able to get on to kind of your local radio station. So if I'm honest, I wasn't overly kind of enthused about going. But how quickly those misconceptions was blown away. For any of you who got out to Japan, and Kirky, I know you did, we caught up over there, but it's such a beautiful country. And if anyone gets the opportunity to get out there to whether just as a holiday or to travel or to watch some sport out there, it is a phenomenal country.
And the organisation was fantastic.
Yeah.
The organisation was incredible.
And the people were so hospitable. They were so proud to have the World Cup in their country, and they wanted to show it off. And so whether you were in Tokyo or whether you were over in Kobe or down in Fukuoka, where, you know, the games are spread around the country, everyone wanted to show off their local kind of beauty, their local kind of cuisine, and we were hosted so well. But also, it was such an impressive World Cup. It had the, you know, the romance of the home team doing so well. You had the drama chucked into it of the hurricane coming through, the tornado and the storms, and whether or not that game between Japan and Scotland would take place. And if it didn't, it mean Japan may have not qualified. So they got that game on, and you know, Japan beating Ireland and then Scotland to get through to the quarterfinals was a fairy tale for the competition.
And actually, it was a great example of flexing to the situation you're in and being hit by something you're not quite expecting. And we've had more of that this year, obviously. But I mean, they did incredibly well to keep that tournament going through that. It was
unbelievable. We got shipped out of Tokyo, and I got sent down to Osaka to do a game. They moved a few of us around, and the storm in Osaka was breathtaking. Some friends were up in Tokyo, and you just saw the scenes, and it was phenomenal. And yet the day after that kind of mass storm, they got the game on at Yokohama Stadium, and they had 80,000 people turning up. And the one thing that you might not know, or if you hadn't visited, the Japanese were so proud of their culture. So they had local people getting out, helping get the stadium ready. And after a match, you know, I've been to Newlands, I've been to Kings Park. You know, you finish the game, you leave your beer bottle where it is, you leave your chips and your half-eaten hamburger on your seat. You probably didn't leave many half-eaten hamburgers, if I'm honest, Kirky. And off you go. But in Japan, the local people would be cleaning up the rubbish afterwards. It was phenomenal. And so we had the fairy tale of Japan, but we also had the fairy tale story of South Africa losing their first game against New Zealand, and then the Khaleesi World Cup. And, you know, I was involved in a couple of games with South Africa, first against the Italians, and then in that quarter-final, which we just saw the highlights of. And to see that team and that story kind of evolve was very, very special. And South Africa, I think I'm right in saying, the only team to have lost the first game in the World Cup and then going on to win it. Yeah, I think that's right. England might have done in 2007 had South Africa not beaten them. Anyway, just so yeah, and you mentioned that quarterfinal. I mean, what was the atmosphere like in the stadium for that game? Because with Japan involved, it must have been immense, wasn't it? The Japan home games were phenomenal. Around the cities, the bars and the restaurants were full. But the noise, but the polite applause, noise. It was polite clapping and cheering and never booing the opposition. And then we saw that the teams join in with that, with the bows at the end of the match or as they were being substituted. So this was the fourth of the quarterfinals, and the hosts, were total underdogs, and they actually put up a decent fight against the South Africans. But the South African power in that quarterfinal just showed, to be able to scrummage and maul like they did, and with their replacement, the bomb squad as they were nicknamed, you just sensed that the Japanese ran out a bit of power on that 50, 60-minute mark and just couldn't live with that, fantastic pack of the All Blacks.
Now, you said it's of the Springboks.
Of the Springboks,
sorry, a bit of a Freudian slip there.
Yeah.
And you said it's a good job we're in London. It is, because we saw that clip at the beginning. You disallowed a try for South Africa, which was not an overly popular decision in many places, including inside the stadium. I think we've got a clip in a moment to show just why, haven't we?
It was quite interesting. As I mentioned a moment ago, a good friend of mine is Jaco Piper from Bloemfontein, one of the international referees, a friend of mine. So after the match, we got back to our hotel, and Jaco was there and we were sharing a beer and talking about the game. And he'd had a couple of red wines by that point. And I said, look, did you see that decision? And we saw that decision in the introduction where I rule out Damien Delande's try, probably wrongly, if I'm honest in review. So I'm chatting to Jaco and saying, what do you make of it? He said, oh, mate, yeah, could have been, could not have been. But did you see the reaction? I'm like, oh, it's interesting you say that. We looked up on the big screen to have a quick look, and there was, me getting a load of bird in the stand. So if you don't mind, I'll just share that bit with you.
Wayne Barnes says no.
I don't know if you can see that at the moment, Curtis.
Hopefully you got that clip there. Wayne Barnes says no.
Nothing being shared. Let me have a bit of a rummage around here, Kirky.
Yeah, technical was never his strong point, to be fair. But Yokohama was probably the best stadium of the lot, wasn't it? Did you feel that better than Tokyo? Because I thought actually, as a stadium go, if you weren't there, the view from everywhere was incredible.
Yeah. I had a real kind of affinity to Yokohama. It's where I refereed a few of my games, and it's one of those proper rugby kind of fields. Yeah. And everyone came in, enjoyed a match, and then went out. And
great atmosphere.
Yeah, great.
The noise was huge. Let's give it a try again.
And here we are.
Wayne Barnes says no.
And I remember looking up at the screen on that night, and I saw that blonde lady as you just saw there, Kirky. And so I said to Jaco, I'm like, yeah, but did you see the amount of crap I got off that blonde woman in the stadium? He's like, what? You mean Sia Khaleesi's wife? I'm like, you are joking. So no. As I looked up into the screen, I was getting a shed load of abuse from Sia Khaleesi's wife. So though he may be a calm and compassionate man, she clearly wasn't on that night.
Did you meet her after that? Did she?
No, I avoided the Springboks for some time.
She didn't want to shake you warmly by the throat. Look, and let's go back. We said we're going to look at the World Cups and South Africa's involvement on. 95 was obviously an iconic World Cup for South Africa. And actually, the referee at the final, a good mate of ours, Ed Morrison, who, believe it or not, people say referees are one-eyed. Well, Ed actually is. He's been born with one eye, and we'll say about going down his blind side. Well, that's what players did, but incredible that he refereed a World Cup final with only half his vision. But you would have been, 16 in 95? Do you have any particular memories of that World Cup as such?
You're right, Kirky. So 95, I was born in 79. So I just turned 16, and I'd also just started refereeing. A friend of my dad's was a referee, and I got injured playing. I played from a young age, and I got injured playing. So after about 2 or 3 months of not recovering from the injury, I did something to my knee. Friend of my dad said, look, come on, Wayne, why don't you come and try out refereeing? And I thought, well, all right, we'll give it a go. So he used to go and do the third 15, as it was called, or the I'm sure it's the same in South Africa, the thirds. and I would do the thirds and he would do the first. And there's a lovely tradition in England is that not only do you get a couple of pounds travelling expenses, but after the match you get a little tankard, a little metal tankard, and you can get a couple of free pints behind the bar. Now, as a young referee, as a 16-year-old, I thought that was bloody brilliant. So I thought I'll carry on doing this. And it quickly became obvious which I was better at, and it wasn't playing, and most of my teammates said that. So
drinking.
Well, it wasn't playing, and so I carried on refereeing. But I remember as a 16-year-old sitting after I'd refereed a local 13 match in their clubhouse, watching that final between the All Blacks and South Africa, and just knowing that we were watching something special that day. And I think, you know, I was fortunate enough to sit there in 2019, obviously supporting perhaps the English team, but knowing that we were seeing something special with that 2019 side as well.
I'm going to spin forward now. Your international career began in 2006 at age 27. You're very young to do that. Where was that? What are your memories of that particular game?
So, Kirky, like you know, but others might not. That as a referee, what actually happens is you progress like a player. You might get a game for the third 15, then the second 15, then into the first. Then you go into your provinces or your regions, and if you do well, you then might get some national recognition. So I worked my way up through the national kind of leagues and my premiership and then European Cup. And in 2006, I got the phone call from the then head of selectors, who was Paddy O'Brien, the Kiwi referee, who was then the head of international referees, to say, Barnsley, we've been watching you, been following you, and we're going to give you your first international match. And so my first international match was Fiji versus Samoa in Suva.
So they wanted to sort of kind of ease you into it a little bit.
Yeah, it was a quiet little affair, Kirky. 3 yellow cards, 2 red cards, 1 coach banned for 6 months for twatting the other coach over the head with his stool. But
so that helped as a launch pad for you with your career. I mean, you know, what happened as a result of that? Did you get much flack?
Well, you need a bit of luck in any job, whether you're as a lawyer or as a so-say MC or as a referee. And that day I got a bit of luck, and the reason why is that it wasn't on television. And so
no evidence.
Yeah. And so when I rang my boss back up in Dublin and said, look, just to let you know, it passed without incident. He said, top draw, and he gave me a Six Nations match on the back of that.
Brilliant. So you went on to the Six Nations. Then, of course, it was the 2007 World Cup the following year. And you got selected. I mean, everybody in refereeing was surprised, I think, but probably none more so than you.
Yeah. So they only take 12 referees ever to a World Cup. Same in Japan, but in France in 2007, only 7 referees. 2007, only 12 referees were selected. And you're right, it was a bit of a surprise to everyone that I was one of the ones selected. So it was quite clear I was going for a bit of experience, going as number 12.
Social secretary?
Well, I definitely had a good go at that as well. But, you know, it went all right, actually, Kirky. So I started off, I refereed the first game between Italy and New Zealand down in the south of France, in Marseille. And it was a cracking game of rugby. New Zealand showed why they were favourites, 70 points to 7. And I was a referee, and referee Wayne Barnes, he did all right, I was told. I then went across to the southwest to Bordeaux, where Ireland played Georgia. And this is the Irish team who were a bit in disarray. It was a really close, tight affair, 12 points to 10. Georgia almost, kind of turned over one of the, the pre-tournament favourites. Entertaining, tight game. Referee Wayne Barnes did all right. Then the third game I did, and again, some people might recall it, was between South Africa, the eventual winners, and Tonga up in the north of France in Lens. And this was one of the most entertaining games of the pool stages. Tonga running the ball from everywhere. Bright mid-afternoon French sunshine, 38 points to 36. Everyone loved the game, and the referee Wayne Barnes, did all right. Yeah. And so what happens then is all the 12 referees stay. We all stayed. We all returned to Paris.
At the end of the group stages.
Yeah, end of the group stages. All the referees kind of stay together, but then the touch judges and the TMOs, they all go home, and the 12 of us just work together. And then you get told who's doing which games. And
so it's the quarterfinals.
The four big ones. And First game was England versus Australia, the game down in Marseille, and Paddy O'Brien, the head selector, said a referee for this game will be Alan Roland. Alan Roland went on to referee the World Cup final, so there's a big round of applause. Well done, Alan. And then the next game, South Africa versus Fiji. Fiji were the surprise package of the World Cup, and the referee for that game was Alan Lewis. Louis was extremely popular, so there's a big round of applause.
What was your state of mind? Because you were the youngster, you were the court jester, so I know, without wishing to sort of put you down a bit, but what was your expectation going into that closed room and that meeting, really, from your point of view?
I was just excited to see how it went, because I'd never been in that kind of inner sanctum.
Which game you were going to be the touch judge?
Yeah, or was I going to be a TMO? And I was like, wow, I'm going to be involved in knockout rugby.
Yeah.
I think I had a bit of a sore head as well from the night before. The second game was Alan Lewis, huge round of applause, well done, Louis. The third game was Scotland and Argentina, game no one really wanted to referee. So when they announced it was Joël Jout, we thought, oh, fantastic, they'd given it the frog. Well done, Joël, and we gave him a massive round of applause.
Apologies to any French people tuning in on this. That's the Frenchman he was talking about there. Crack on.
But the final game was the big one, the one that probably shouldn't have happened if the organisers had got their way, but it was the hosts, France, playing the favourites, New Zealand, down in Cardiff. Millennium Stadium, Saturday night, 8 p.m. kickoff, 78,000, closed roof. This was going to be the big one. And I thought, wow, what a game this is going to be. This is going to be fantastic. I want to watch this game.
Whoever gets this game is...
this is going to be the one that everyone's watching. And I looked around the room and I thought, right, who's getting this? And there's a guy called Chris White, who's another Englishman, a bit of a mentor of mine. He said, I thought, he's done 50 tests. That could be the game for Chris White, man for experience.
But you've done how many tests by this?
I've done six.
Right,
Six. Okay. So I looked around the room and then I thought, but there's Jonathan Kaplan, the South African referee,
JK.
the best referee in the world, according to Jonathan Kaplan.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought maybe Kappers might get it. And then Paddy O'Brien said the referee for this game will be Wayne Barnes, and the room went silent. Apart from me giggling like a small child in the corner.
Did you sort of do did you just say Wayne Barnes?
I just started laughing. I was like, someone's had me on here, aren't they? So off we went to Cardiff, and not a lot really happened in that game, Kirk.
Giving you a quarter-final of France against New Zealand, with France the host nation, what could possibly go wrong?
Let's have a look.
Shall we?
Referee Wayne Barnes is deemed such a rising star. He was awarded the World Cup quarter-final after just 11 tests. But following the All Blacks' loss, his performance raised a few eyebrows.
Damien try. Michalak. Forward pass, the referee's missed it. Michalak gets the pass back in field. Try. The forward pass here was missed. No question. That was forward.
It's interesting, Kirky, that the commentator there says on the news says raised a few eyebrows.
Well, I wonder if the French commentators would have been so big about being a forward pass, because they were Kiwi, weren't they?
But the commentary saying a few eyebrows are raised. Actually, I got mentioned in the National Parliament. I had an effigy of me burnt in Christchurch, and in 2007 I was named the third most hated man in New Zealand.
Behind who?
Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden.
Fair point. Yeah. I've got to tell you, if you've ever been to New Zealand, in Queenstown, I don't think it's there anymore, is it? There's a bar in New Zealand with a model of Wayne Barnes that you could actually relieve yourself onto, but we won't go any further than that. But looking at that, we're in the stadium on the night, the game's finished, you're in the dressing room in Cardiff, and if you've been to Cardiff, the stadium is right in the middle of the city. I guess you're there with your team of match officials. Were you aware of what had gone on, or was it just, did any of the All Blacks say anything coming off the pitch, or what happened?
It was, so you didn't realise straight away, and then we're going into our changing room, and we're sitting in there, and I've got the 2 touch judges with me, with Jonathan Kaplan and Tony Spreadbury, and the video referee for that game was Chris White, the other Englishman, as I said, the mentor of mine. We're sitting in there, and he came into the changing room, and he said, "Oh, fellas, what a game of rugby. That was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Barnesy, I am so proud of you. You've done yourself well. You've just done your first knockout game, and it was wonderful." I'm like, oh, you know, someone who I admire and appreciate, you know, he's giving me that compliment. He said, "Barnesy, look, there might have been a forward pass in the lead up to one of the tries, but I don't think anyone noticed." So yeah, shows what a judge of kind of opinion Chris White's got.
So you know, after a match like that, you're in the dressing room, in the sanctuary of the dressing room. You having a quiet drink and just reflecting and so on.
So what happens usually in Cardiff? Any of you who know Cardiff, the referees will stay in a hotel in the centre of town called Hilton, and we'll walk down the ground to the ground a couple of hours before the match, and it's wonderful because you get to take in the atmosphere and just see what's going on.
You're walking through all the fans,
exactly.
And so smell of onions.
Yeah, that night was wonderful. You know, the All Black shirts were all there, the French blue shirts with their cockerel or the cock on their heads, and that was it was a sight to behold. But after the match, you sometimes walk back, just depending on the lie of the land, but. We were told after that game, look, 10 o'clock at night, 10:30, the All Blacks have gone out. There's a lot of drunk people out on the streets. We'll get you a lift back. Of course, that's fine. They said, but it'll be about an hour and a half until the roads open. And we're like, oh, well, let's sit down. So we're sitting down having a beer. And the touch judge, Tony Spreadbury, said, I'll be back in a minute. And he disappeared off. And
he's a paramedic, wasn't he?
He was a paramedic at the same time, yeah. So he disappeared off, and about 5 minutes later, he said, "Come on, drink up, bring your bags. I've got us a lift." I'm like, "What? Rows are closed." He's like, "No, all sorted." So I just assumed they'd opened them up a little bit earlier. So as we walk out to where you walk in, and it's underneath the West Stand, and the doors to the car park are open. There, in front of the doors to the car park, was sitting an ambulance with the doors are open, welcoming the team of officials in.
His company car.
Exactly. So off we went, being driven by one of his colleagues down through Cardiff, and we arrived at the Hilton.
Did you have the sirens and everything?
Sirens going,
flashing lights.
But the Hilton was also the hotel, because there's not many hotels in Cardiff, where the French team was staying. So around the steps of the Hilton were all the French fans. They all knew it. They were waiting to greet their heroes. But like any person would, you know, even if you're in, you know, the heights of celebration, when an ambulance turns up, you calm down a little bit and you open up so someone can get in and out of the ambulance. So there we are. The crowd calms down. The doors open as the referee jumps out of the back of the ambulance to be greeted by cheers, draped around with a flag of the tricolour colours, and carried into the reception
by the supporters.
To be greeted, unfortunately, by the New Zealand committee, who were also staying there. So
I'm sure they must have seen the funny side of it.
Yeah.
But I guess when your name's Wayne Barnes and you work for the RFU, it's not difficult to work out, and please don't use this, but what your email address might be. When did you receive any at all to do with the game?
Yeah, it is quite interesting. Yeah, as I said, we didn't really know the enormity of it until I went back to Paris the next day, and I checked into my hotel room. And
because all the referees were in, you'd been given an apartment in Paris. You were all billeted in France,
all in a hotel in Paris. And so we went back there. We got there. I checked back in, got to my room. You know, hang up all your clothes, sit down at your desk, just check in on your computer. And then it was that point, Kirky, I realised that there might be something wrong, because it was that point I opened up my emails and I had 783 messages. Now most of them I could decipher whether or not to open. So for example, when the title was "You do us," or you prat, I pressed delete. So 781 later, I was left with a single email.
Okay, and was your mum or dad any of the people who sent you any of the other emails? I don't know, but maybe we'll come on to that story later. But actually, you know, a heck of a lot of learning for you, I guess, in terms of looking back on that. And how did you react when you realised what had happened? Because I still can't say today whether it was forward or whether it wasn't forward. The thing is, you made that judgment in all honesty. You didn't go out to make a mistake. How did it affect you? And how did you recover from that? And how was the rest of the team around you in terms of your refs?
Yeah, look, it is forward. We've just seen a video clip. It's clearly forward, and you don't want to make those mistakes. And then it was a difficult period of time. Your name being plastered across some headlines. Being trending on social media. And as I said, there were effigies of me.
You did receive death threats.
And there were a couple of death threats that came through. Not sure how long it would have taken them to get from their little town in Christchurch all the way to London, but it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't pleasant for my family and for my friends. And so you do think, well, is this worth it, or do I go back into the Shard and carry on with my other profession?
And they didn't want you either, but we're still here.
On the back of that, I sat down with a few trusted colleagues and said, look, do I carry on? Is this what is and all it's meant to be? It's a lot of commitment, and this has been a shitty few months. And to be fair, the people who I had around me said, look, you're only 28 at the time. You've got a long career ahead of you. This will be a blip. We then put a plan together, and we said, look, we will prepare better. As a barrister, you prepare meticulously. Everything, is thought through, what a prosecutor might say, what your client might say, all these different scenarios. And so we took that onto the rugby field. And so, I knew where teams were going to kick from. I knew they were going to scrummage. I knew how they were going to attack. I knew they were going to defend. So I could go into a game with a real clear understanding of what might happen. And that probably, I didn't have that kind of preparation when I was going into 2007. I'd only been refereeing half a dozen years or so, and I'd only refereed 6 test matches. So to learn from that, and that preparation was key, was fundamental for me to improving. And part of that preparation, what was important in preparation was how I reviewed matches as well. So I got international scrummage coaches, I got current international coaches, I got sports psychologists, all to work with me about how I could get better. And so the review culture that I kind of implemented very much became part of the way that I prepared.
Very important to be honest with yourself, I guess, and self-reflect. Look, we're kind of coming up to the whistle's going to go for half time in a moment, but it's fascinating to hear what you're saying. And maybe in the second half, we can look about that planning and actually what happens when it doesn't go according to plan, as you experienced there in Cardiff that night. George, I'm wondering if you're, still awake, but more importantly, are you there? Because just give us, have you heard any of that in the first 40 minutes? I'm hoping you have.
Yeah, I was busy analysing my arse in the mirror, making sure I could still referee games.
Background mirror.
Thanks very much. It's so great to listen to you two bantering again, and such a memorable time that game. And I know it's kind of haunted Wayne ever since he did it, but I mean now it's just become something that's just talked about wherever he goes. But I mean, it's such a testament to him that he's used it in such a positive way to just build and get better. So, and what's interesting is nearly every referee, I think, has a moment like that, don't they? Where perhaps things haven't gone to plan, and it's just how you deal with it, what you actually do with that information. So, half time. A couple of questions have come in, as you can imagine. First one is from Tegan, actually. Tegan, I know, used to play up in Wales, where that fateful event happened. And he says, being a bribery barrister, have you ever, ironically, been approached to throw a game? You might not be able to answer that. I don't know.
Well, it's maybe I should answer that question, right?
It's interesting that Kurky asked earlier around how many test matches that we've been involved in, and we have been involved in 93, me being involved in 92.
And me in 1. And that one actually can answer that question because we were together. And this was for the 2007 World Cup. So I can just say Wayne hasn't been offered any, as far as I'm aware. However, indirectly he was, because we were out to officiate Morocco against Portugal and in the World Cup qualifying. Now, you may think that Morocco don't play rugby. You'd be right, they were shit. But actually, we had to go out because it was an then IRB appointment. We had to go out 48 hours beforehand, and we were picked up at the airport by, it has to be said, a drunk chauffeur who took us to the first hotel, which I have to say we refused to stay in, because the only difference between that and a bucket of crap was a bucket. So eventually we ended up in a hotel which had a roof. And on the 2 nights before the test, they said, we will come and pick you up at your hotel, and we will be taking you to dinner with the president of the Moroccan Federation, Mr. Aziz. And we turned up at the aforementioned host's humble dwelling, I say. It was probably about 10 acres. It had armed guards all around the entire place, outside on the roads. So we go in there, there's Wayne, myself, and the other match officials, and we sit down. I am sitting next to Mr. Aziz, the president. Now, this game is a repechage game between Morocco and Portugal. The first leg this week was in Casablanca. The second week was going to be in Lisbon, refereed by Nigel Owen. So he thought, well, we'll get a home win, get out of here easy enough, and Nigel can have the second leg. And whoever won this game was going to go on to eventually, I think, play Uruguay, who would then qualify for the World Cup. So we're sitting at dinner. Now, Mr. Aziz is to my left. To my right is another gentleman who's the secretary of the Moroccan Federation, whose name, coincidentally, was Mr. Aziz. Between him and Wayne was another gentleman by the surname of Aziz, because he was another member of in fact, the entire Aziz family were the Moroccan Federation. So we're sitting at dinner, and we're in the first course, and Mr. Aziz, the president, turns to me and goes, excuse the actor, goes, David, you realize that this is a very important game for Morocco? And I go, yes, I do. He said, what do you think it would take for us to win? So I said, well, I think you'll need to score more points than Portugal. He said, no, I don't think you understand. I said, I do understand, and please, let's not go down that avenue. Let's have an enjoyable evening and not mention it again. So we get through the main course. I'm getting a little bit nervous here, and the rest of the conversation seems to be going on with the other Azizis. And after dessert, he says to me, okay, maybe tomorrow we come to your hotel with some women. And I said, no, thank you. Do you prefer men? Was his response to that. And well, I won't tell you where the conversation went then, because I did put my foot in it rather largely at that point. Not him, I can't really say it. Can I say it? Yeah. Okay. Because I, being quick of wit but slow of thinking, went, well, would I be able to tell the difference? So it didn't really, but I have to tell you, we did everything in that game to get a home win. We must have had a 50-minute second half, which we'll come on to that later, actually. It was a precursor for something else. Could they score? No, they dropped it in goal. Our armed guards disappeared once they lost the match. We even got held up, this is absolutely true, coming out of Casablanca airport, going through immigration, showed our passports, they took them away to look at them because they knew who we were. It was, anyway, to answer your question, yes.
Sounds like a regular day in East London to me. Lovely, thanks for that. And I've got another question here. So obviously the forward pass that unfortunately has plagued your career. And since then we've had a lot of technology that's come into sport. This question from one of my team, actually, Sanka. He says, what's your opinion on technology in sport? A lot of decisions are made using replays, and there's a lot of stop, start in it. What are your thoughts around that?
I think if you just look at that 2007 World Cup, in that what you want to be able to be sure of is that the right team win the game, or the right team get the decisions that they should get. And in that match, within about 10 or 15 seconds, by looking up at the screen, we knew that we got that decision wrong, but we couldn't rectify it. So as someone who's still a massive fan of rugby and of a sport, I don't want the game to be kind of decided upon a referee error. So the more technology that we can use, the better. You know, it works really well in cricket, works really well in tennis. It adds to the excitement. We're still getting there with rugby to make sure, as your colleague says, that we don't overly use it, and we use it kind of, you know, just to get the big decisions, or you can have a real stop-start match. Football in the UK, the English Premier League, are going through that at the moment and trying to make sure that, you know, they work out how to use it well. But I just don't think we can have the FIFA World Cup final decided upon an offside goal, which can be rectified in 3 or 4 seconds, or a handball that was never be a handball, because it just affects so many people's lives, you know, the players, the officials, but also the supporters. So I'm a huge fan of technology. I think we should continue to look at ways of advancing it. I know there are companies already out there looking at being able to tell the direction of a ball by a microchip in it, to see if there's pressure put on the ball. You know, we go back to the 1995 World Cup, and the French will still say that they grounded the ball in that semi-final.
Derek Bevan got a nice house out of that in South Africa, didn't he? Only joking, everyone.
But, you know, we want technology to be able to help us, you know, as in business. You know, the more that we can get the big decisions right, the better it's going to be.
So, George, what you may not appreciate, I'm going to tell Didier Menace, sorry, you may not appreciate, is that whilst I made only one international appearance, I was the very first person to award a try in a Six Nations game via TMO.
I know this story.
Yeah, I can tell you the story, but I need to give a bit of context to it, actually, because this involved a great friend of ours called Didier Mene. Now, Didier Mene was a crap referee, but one of the funniest men you could ever come across. And actually, whilst I'm genuinely not doing this to upset all of you watching, but to give some context as to how quick thinking he is. Didier refereed the second test in the 1997 British and Irish Lions tour, which the Lions won to win the series with a drop goal from Jeremy Guscott. And Didier was the referee. And if ever you see any pictures of that iconic drop goal, you'll see him there. Anyway, in those days, the referees used to have to go down a couple of weeks before to referee a game and sort of acclimatise. And I'll warn you now, this story, if I told it in closed company, I would use the F word, but I'm going to substitute the F word for the word fudge. So when you hear the word fudge, excuse me, you know what word should be going on in there. So Didier arrives a couple of weeks early, and he's doing a regional game. He's got 2 South African touch judges there. And as I say, very quick-witted man. Anyway, first half seemingly goes okay, and then he pulls out a yellow card. There's a bit of as he put it, a petit fracas takes place. He calls these 2 players towards them, and from the touchline, the touch judge, South African touch judge, sees him issue yellow cards, and suddenly, as they're walking away, blows his whistle furiously, calls this guy back, and suddenly sees him issue a red card. So at half time, the touch judge, and excuse my accent, says, "Hey, Didier, why the red card for this guy? What did he do?" And Didier goes, "Well, these guys are fighting." I say, "You must not fight. Come over to me." He said, "I don't want you fighting. You take 10 minutes. 10 minutes for you, 10 minutes for you." So these guys, they're walking away. As they walk away, I hear this guy goes, "Well, fudge you. Come here. What did you say?" He said, "I said fudge you. My friend, I choose who I fudge, and now I fudge you." Red card. So that gives you an indication of kind of what he's like as a guy. So spin forward, 2002, Six Nations, Cardiff again, and Wales are playing Scotland. It's the very first time the TMO has been used in the Six Nations. Now, Portugal comes into the story again. I'm watching the game, Wales against Scotland, in Portugal. I'm in between a holiday and hosting a conference, and I'm there in a bar in Vilamora on my own there. The big thing about this game is it's Rob Howley, the scrum half, who got done for gambling last year. What were the odds of that? It was his last game playing for Wales. Anyway, Scotland driving in goal. It's Gordon Bullock, the Scottish hooker, goes down. The referee, Joël Juge, goes like this. And the commentator says, and he's going upstairs for the very first time in a Six Nations game, to the video referee, Didier Mene. So I think, I'm going to ring him, leave a message. So I ring him. He answers, goes, "Hello, Kurky." Didier said, "Do you think this is a try?" I said, "Well, it looks all right to me." He goes, "Hold on, Joël, it's a try." And I gave that try from a bar in Vilamora. So absolutely true. So, mate, whatever you say, I did another international. That's 2, doubled my score.
Such a claim to fame, Kurky. I love it.
Oh, incredible.
Just wheedle your way in everywhere. Now,
radio.
One more question before we go back into the second half, if that's okay. So I've had this question quite a few times come in various forms, but it's in its purest form is, who is the most annoying scrum half? And then there's a follow-up, which is, you know, who is probably one of the most intimidating players you've ever had to referee as well?
George,
good question.
If I'm honest, and I've been lucky, I've been on the field with some great players: the Richie McCaws, the George Gregans, the John Schmidts.
Do you know Richie McCaw, since he retired, he's built a new house, and he hasn't got a front door because he always goes in the side. I don't know if that's true.
But if I'm honest, out of all of those players, I was absolutely petrified of Martin Johnson.
Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely petrified of him, because like he was back to those days, you know, when I started off refereeing. I was still a rugby fan. I still loved being, you know, watching rugby, and England were my team. And Jono was, you know, a bit of a legend, and you know, the '97 Lions. Then he refereed the World Cup. He was he probably did try and referee. But then he was the captain of the World Cup winning team. And so I always admired him, but I also petrified him. You know, he had that big brow, a big nose, a big ears, a big knuckles, you know, and he never took a step backwards. I mean, what happens as a young referee? In my first season in the Premiership was 2003, and he was just coming to the end of his career. And what they do as a young referee, they send you to some of those cauldron places. Now Welford Road in Leicester is one of those places, but if you can imagine being sent to somewhere like, I know, Bloemfontein, you know, to Vodacom Park, you know, something like that, where they're on top of you, you know, that noise of, you know, of Newlands or something like that, where it's really intimidating. And so I got sent to Leicester, but what they did is they did Leicester against a team that they were expected to beat, and they were playing Leeds, so top of the table versus bottom of the table. Go and have your kind of first run out at Leicester. And I thought, well, this will be great. You know, Leicester you should get up in this game, and I can just, you know, experience it for the first time. And so Leicester were doing what they expected. They were 68 points up to 3 against Leeds. In the 3 or 4 minutes to go, the scrum half from Leeds, a guy called Scott Bierman, took a quick tap penalty. And he was absolutely flattened after around 30 centimetres. So I blew my whistle, thought, oh, right, he's going to the bin. And as I looked down and he looked up, there, the player lying on the floor on top of Scott Bierman was Martin Johnson, CBE. And I thought, shit, I'm going to have to sin bin the Lions and England captain Martin Johnson. So I pulled out a yellow card and said, "I'm very sorry, sir." To which he replied, "Don't worry, it's the only effing decision you've got right all day." So, yes, I was extremely intimidated by some players, but one in particular.
Brilliant.
And you've sidestepped the most annoying scrum half question. I'm not going to let you get away with that. Come on, who is it?
Well, there
has to be international, so everybody knows who it is.
Well, there is a reason why Austin Healy, nickname is Piles, and that is because he is an irritant in the backside.
Yeah, so there you are. For those of you, if you don't know who Austin Healy is, just Google him and watch some videos, because it won't take long. He said, someone said to me one day, he said, why do people take an instant dislike to me? I said, it just saves a lot of time, frankly.
Yeah, he is a pain in the backside, for sure.
Where are we on the auction? Is there any about?
Well, I'm just about to let you know that. So the auction is actually currently sitting at 2,500 rand. So please bid generously. It's for such a worthy cause. It's the Connect Sports Academy. They really do change lives. For instance, another story here, Boepa and Lamla, 2 boys who started their rugby career in 2015 in group training sessions with the Connect Sports Academy in Khayelitsha. And they'll soon be leaving Rondebosch High School, where they're there under scholarships, which have been facilitated by the Connect Sports Academy. And when they leave Rondebosch, they're actually going into professional contracts with the Western Province side. And it's such a wonderful story. So ladies and gentlemen, please do dig deep and help kids like Boepa and Lamla. The link to the auction app is in the chat, and it's super easy to use. So please do get bidding. So half time over. We've eaten the oranges, squeezed the magic sponge. Back over to you, David and Wayne. Back onto the second half.
Can I just actually add to what you just said? Because for Sese, Lucania and Lamla, my daughter, about 7 or 8 years ago, spent 2 months in Kaielisha, and she almost went out a girl and came back a woman. She was so it's giving me goosebumps on my arms now, hairs rising, because it was an incredible experience for her. So I absolutely echo what you're saying. So whatever you can afford, please send in the money, and if you want, we can send you someone else's shirt if you don't want Wayne's, frankly. But but please do. Okay, thanks, George. We'll get on with the second half now. Now, second halves have been something that have come into your sphere, Barnsley. We mentioned about the Morocco-Portugal. We tried like 50 minutes. They couldn't do it. And you said about preparation and so on. And referees are always going to be controversial, as George said earlier. But that kind of, excuse me, comes with the territory. You can talk about planning, but you can't always plan for every eventuality, can you?
It's definitely one thing that I took on board after 07, not just around the preparation, but the preparing for the nuclear potential kind of issue during a game. And I work with a sports psychologist around that, rather than just just working with a sports psychologist to deal with that as well. And so the idea was that you don't want anything to jump out, and you don't want anything to kind of take you by surprise, whether that's during a match or post-match. And so we've worked through lots of situations. You don't think they're ever going to happen. But for example, I remember watching the Bloodgate issue, which happened in England, where there was an allegation that a team, Harlequins, had cheated, and that they had got a player off the pitch by biting a blood capsule, and so he could be the player, Tom Williams, could be replaced. And I thought, that's really interesting. How would I deal with that? What would I say? What would I do? And so I'd worked through a few of these scenarios, but you never think that they're going to happen. You never think. And then we had kind of one game.
Do you think he needs a head assessment?
Yes.
Yes, as a doctor, you have said he needs a head assessment.
It's the first red card in a premiership final, and I cannot remember a more dramatic finish to a half than this. He leaves the field.
So we first of all saw the France versus Wales game. This was the last weekend of the Six Nations. This was at the Stade de France, 78,000 people. Crescendo, we'd had allegations of biting, of cheating, of dangerous tackles. And then the French wanted to replace a player. They wanted to take off one of their props to bring on another prop. And the only way that they could do that...
And this was at a 5-metre scrummage,
wasn't it? This was at an attacking 5-metre scrummage. The only way they could do that was whether or not it was a blood injury, and clearly there wasn't any blood, or a head injury. And there was a suggestion from the Welsh players that he didn't have a head injury. And so I prepared for this. I'd spoken to, my sports psychologist and prepared my wording for this. So when it happened, in the heat of the battle, I was ready for it. And you heard what I said there. You turn to the doctor and you pass the responsibility on to him. So it was quite clear. I said, look, are you saying as a medic that he's concussed? And his answer was yes. So all the headlines the next day.
You're not going to disagree with him, exactly. Obviously. So.
And what was really nice, Rob Howley, the then coach, he was standing in for Warren Gatland. He said it in the aftermath of that. He said, look, we don't apportion any blame to Wayne on that. He did what he needed to do, and he listened to the medic. And so, again, it was preparing for that kind of nuclear kind of potential, Kirky.
Did you think the French were cheating? Or were they... cheating. Were they bending the rules or whatever to their advantage?
It's impossible to say or to know, if I'm honest. What you've got to do is you deal with the facts in front of you. That's why as a lawyer I do. You don't have to kind of you get asked a lot as a lawyer, you know, how can you defend someone who, you know, who's guilty of an offence? Well, you don't know if they're guilty of an offence.
You're dealing with facts, not opinions.
They tell you what they know, they tell you what they say happened, and you present it. In this case, I was told that a player had a concussion, and so I dealt with the facts, and we allowed that player to go off.
The Dylan Hartley red card, it was a premiership final. It never happened in the final before. But there was slightly more to it than that, because it meant that he missed going on the British Lions tour as well. When you make that decision, and clearly it shows how honest you are, but did any of that go through your mind at all in the process of, you know, red card? Because if you haven't seen the footage, you'd warned him specifically earlier about the language he was using, and you'd said, if I think you're talking to me and you use language like that, I will send you off.
Yeah,
words to that effect.
So, you know, it's worth emphasising this was the grand finale of the season.
Yeah.
This was Twickenham, 82,000. First time Northampton Saints had been in the Premiership final.
Against their biggest rivals, Leicester.
Yeah, East Mids derby. This was a massive game. And Dylan Hartley was the Northampton captain, went on to be the England captain, and he was flying out to Australia the next day.
And he was a New Zealander, just to throw that into the mix as well.
But he was off on his Lions tour. And in the lead up to that discussion that you just saw in the video, Dylan had made a couple of comments which I thought were aimed at me. So I'd spoken to him, as you said, Kirky, and said, look, if I think your comments are aimed at me, you're going to force me to make a decision. There was then a scrum penalty right at the end of the match, end of the half, to which then Dylan turned towards me and said the words, "You fucking cheat."
Other words are available, just to put that out there, but that's context.
And there's certain things as a referee where you just react to, and your integrity being questioned is one of them. But again, I'd thought about that. I'd prepared for that. I'd thought about my wording. And you see on the video what I did was I went across to the vice captain, a guy called Tom Wood, and explained straight away what had happened, repeated those words. And then in the aftermath, Dylan said that those words weren't aimed at me. The independent disciplinary panel put a lot of emphasis on the point that I had made that initial kind of statement straight away. So again, I didn't want to. You don't want to send anyone off, but sometimes, as an arbiter, as someone who's who is kind of there to keep order, you have to make those big decisions, and it was a big decision, not one I wanted to make, but one I had prepared for.
Was there any reaction from the Leicester team or anything as you were going off? I mean, Tom Young's his opposite number would have been loving it, I suppose.
Well, that was it.
Especially as he was going on the Lions tour as well, wasn't he?
Well, that was the irony of it, I suppose, that after the match, Dylan had said that he was saying it at Tom Young's. He then said that he was saying it to his teammate about Tom Young's. My understanding of it is that Tom Young's, who was, as you said, going on the Lions, was asked to give evidence on Dylan's behalf, but refused to do so because he said that he didn't know who he was saying it at, and it wasn't for him to make that kind of that comment. So there was some animosity, obviously, between those two. But what was quite ironic is that a couple of weeks later, I got married. And I then went on my honeymoon, first of all, to Sri Lanka.
Your best man wasn't Tom Young.
Well, interesting you say it, Kirky, though, that we then ended up in the Maldives for the final week of our honeymoon. You know, a beautiful place, and if you've ever been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But we were then sitting there, my wife and I, and rugby was not allowed to be discussed on a honeymoon. And we were there on a little island in Gili Lankan, Fiji, sitting there enjoying, a manly drink, something like a sex on the beach or something like that. And you could only get to this island by a speedboat. So we were sitting there one evening, and all of a sudden the speedboat came up to the jetty, and I thought, it must be someone coming into this island. Only 20 huts on this island. All little waterside terraces, sitting there having a drink, and then off jumped the boat, this little squat figure, and I looked across, and I thought, wow, and it got closer and closer, the squat figure with his partner, And then it got closer, and I'm like, oh no, it's not. And as I'm sitting there, a hand came on my shoulder, and Tom Young said, "This would be a great photo for Dylan, wouldn't it?"
But actually, just one thing I want to go back to on that incident. You very deliberately, knowing that you were live on television and refereeing in the crowd, people could hear, very deliberately repeated the F word so that people understood the seriousness of what he'd done and why you'd taken the action you did. So it's, again, a very honest kind of decision. And look, your international trips, you had so many of them over the years into your career. But I know that in 2009, going to South Africa, we mentioned the Lions just now, was really one of your highlights for you, because you were actually refereeing the British and Irish Lions against the Cheetahs, I think I'm right in saying.
Yeah.
So for a so-called home referee to referee the British and Irish Lions is a true honour. What are your memories of that?
Well, it was the first time it ever happened. Always in the past, the Lions are refereed either by the local referees in the midweek games. So if the tour goes to South Africa, the South African international referees would referee those games, and then the test matches would be refereed by neutrals. But in 2009, they changed that policy, and they said that the home nations, the English, the Irish, the Welsh, the Scots, could referee their own the Lions games, and I was selected, so I was going to be the first Englishman ever to referee the British and Irish Lions. Now, I know most people think that referees are out there just to spoil their afternoon, but we're massive rugby fans as well, and I was so excited to be part of that. I've never been on a Lions tour, and to go to South Africa, you know, the excitement here for next year is, you know, is palpable already.
I'm going to be out there.
Oh, lucky you.
I know.
But, you know, in 2009, I was like, wow, I'm going to be part of the Lions. So I went across, and for 2 weeks I ran touch. So first of all, I ran touch for some of the South African referees. The Gauteng Lions, as they were then called, versus the British and Irish Lions in Joburg, down to Durban to do the Sharks against the Lions, down into Cape Town for the Stormers against the Lions. And then I flew up to referee my match, which was the Orange Free State Cheetahs, as they were then called, against the British and Irish Lions. And look, after 2 weeks of being on the Lions tour, the first thing that you have to do is
drink.
Is sober up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you sober up, and then you realise that you're about to be part of, you know, the enormity of it all. And and this was the week before the Lions test, you know, the first Lion test. So all the big dogs are out that day, you know. So you had the O'Connells, the O'Driscolls, the Halfpennies, the Joneses. And as I ran out onto that Vodacom pitch, I was ecstatic. I was so proud. You look around, you know, it's a wonderful stadium, atmospheric stadium, and I thought, wow, you know, this is something to behold. Halftime, the Lions were losing, and sitting in the changing room, my two South African referees, and I'm like, oh my goodness, am I getting this right? Have I got the pictures right? And they're like, oh no, it's going fine. It's going fine.
Of course they would.
I'm like, oh yeah, there's this incident, and it's like, just hold on a second. And then all of a sudden, our changing room was right next to the changing room of the British and Irish Lions, and we could hear some of the messages coming through. So we listened up. First of all, you had Ian McGeechan, the Scottish coach of the Lions, you know, squeaking out some technical orders in his high-pitched Scottish voice. You then had Paul O'Connell, who was the Lions captain of that tour, booming out some orders about having pride in his shirt. And then there was a voice that I hadn't heard in the change room before. And so we listened up, and it went something like this. It went, right then, fellas, this ain't bloody good enough. I tell you what, in the second half, we got to get out there, we got to out-ruck them, out-scrum them, out-maul them. And if we do that, I'll tell you what, we'll bloody dies like a pheasant in the flames.
Rise like a pheasant in the flames.
Like a pheasant in the flames, he repeated. So I looked around, and my touch judges were giggling away. But off we went for the second half. Well, the Lions won with a controversial last-minute penalty, Kirky.
Strange that.
These things happen. And then afterwards, we were out in my little team, and in Jaco Piper, who I've mentioned a few times, was looking after me in Bloemfontein. Took me to a nightclub in Bloemfontein, the only nightclub in Bloemfontein. And we were there with my little team. And then the great thing about the Lions is you get to see the players. You know, they are out, they are enjoying themselves, they are socialising as well. And so we're in this club. The Free State Cheetah boys came in first of all, and they gave me a big, thumbs up and bought me a beer, and then in come the Lions. And there's one player who I recognised and I knew quite well, a guy called Adam Jones.
Bomb.
Bomb. The British Irish Lions and Welsh prop.
Massive hair.
Yeah. And then the penny clicked. I thought, bloody hell. So I went across and I chatted to him. I said, "Oh, congratulations today, Adam." And he said, "Oh, Tidy Barnesy, bloody brilliant day, wasn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it was very good. Well done. Great recovery, great comeback. Barnesy, it bloody was. Bloody difficult first half that was." And I said, "But Bomb, Adam, do you mind me just saying one thing?" "Oh, of course not, but of course not." I said, "Half time, we heard you speaking." Right. I said, and heard you speak before, and we heard your speech. Barnesy needed bloody saying, it did. Needed saying. I said, "Oh, yes." He said, "One thing, Adam." "What's that, but?" He said, "It might be pheasant in the flames, right?" I said, "Mate, I think it's phoenix." "Oh, shit," he said. "I knew it was one of those birds beginning with an F."
Front row player. Sorry to any front row players watching.
First, Adam.
So look, we are in the second half. We can't overrun too much, so we need to kind of move on. I think we've got a clip, haven't we, from the Lions?
Well, let's have it. Yeah, let's just remind us of that one.
Remind yourself of that.
This is their chance to get a slap on the back from the whole of the country. And the Lions will need to be on red alert today.
To 22! Barnesy! To 22! It's only knocked on, that's what it's saying.
So yeah, cracking memories.
And yeah, cracking memories. Let's jump forward to the next World Cup in your career, so to speak, 2015. Now, you mentioned earlier about referees got together sort of 8-10 weeks earlier, and the teams do, and so on. 2015, although actually the Springbok team may not wish to remember the 2003 Rudolph Straley getting together for their team building, which I'm sure you kept your clothes on, didn't you? Last year, what was it like for you guys? Did you have a training camp? What happened? You said you left. I think your 5-year-old just starting school, your 2-year-old running around, "Where's Daddy?" Yeah. And Polly, your wife, probably going, "Thank God he's gone." But,
well, 2015 was a bit different because we were in London.
Yeah.
Yes, it was I was kind of in charge of making sure that all the guys coming in, the other 11 referees, got to see a little bit of London and a bit of the country. And so in the build-up to the World Cup, we decided we would take the referees down to Lympstone, where the Royal Marines train.
You were going to become Royal Marines for a day.
Yeah. Well, it was 2 or 3 days, really kind of, just being with them and listening to them and training with them, and it almost killed a couple of the video referees, as you can imagine. But it just started that tournament off so specially as a group of referees, and just to share a little bit of kind of what we did.
I've never seen anyone look so uncomfortable in military uniform as you in that clip there. Well, ridiculous.
Well, you're right, but if you want to see ridiculous, Kirky, there was another bit which has not been seen so far, but this was us showing that we can also handle a gun.
What I love is the look on the real Marines in the background who cannot believe what they're watching and think, thank God they're not defending our country.
But it was they were a special group, and to have the World Cup in your own kind of country was great to be able to host. Just a shame about the bloody result.
There's one question I think that comes up quite a lot when it's talking about referees in the 2015 World Cup. A mate of ours, Craig Joubert, South African referee, great guy, great referee. But there was controversy around the Australia-Scotland game with a winning penalty he awarded seemingly wrongly in the last minute of the game for Australia to beat Scotland. And then the way in which he left the pitch, the perception was he ran away. And that's what the press made it. He ran away from the game. I know you're one of his closest friends. I just wondered what it was like for you guys supporting him, what it was like for him, and just what your take was on that.
Well, it was interesting. Was in 2007, I suppose, I was the referee who got kind of pillared in the press and by one of the nations. In 2011, Bryce Lawrence was kind of the scapegoat for someone being knocked out, South Africa being knocked out. And then Craig in 2015 got the ire of the Scottish fans. And we're a close group, there's only 12 of us, Kirky, so we do work and live together for that 10 weeks. And, you get to know each other's families and they become friends. So when one of your mates is hurting, it hurts for us as a team. And so you try and support them. But, the idea that Craig Joubert ran off because he was scared is just a farce. What Craig did was try and protect the game, and he wanted any confrontation to take place out of the public eye, and got into the tunnel to make sure that if a coach or a player wanted to say something, it protected our game, what's special about our game, and that, that values. And so Craig is a great mate, but when you actually start thinking about it, what Craig did was kind of extremely sensitive.
Because at that moment, when the final whistle goes, that is the most volatile moment in the game almost, isn't it? Because you've got one coach who wants your blood, the other one wants to come up and say thank you very much. But actually very few coaches come up and say, thanks, you won that game for us. And so his explanation, I think it's very plausible, is that, look, he just wanted to get off so that it didn't bring the game into disrepute. And he's now still very successful in sevens and so on, isn't it? Because people say, oh, well, he'll disappear. But he didn't disappear. He fronted up and he went on and refereed, I think, in the Tri-Nations.
Oh, yeah. Craig refereed the 2011 World Cup final, refereed quarterfinal in 15, and was an extremely talented referee, and still, now working for World Rugby, but running the sevens and coaching all the sevens and aspirational referees. And we were on the phone call for an hour this morning just catching up.
Brilliant. Well, look, coming back to the 2019 Rugby World Cup, you are the most experienced World Cup referee, I believe, with 3 quarterfinals, a semi-final, 2 bronze finals. It seems there's just one game missing from that list, and England really screwed up your career by getting to the final in November, didn't they? As you were kind of widely tipped. Your name was on the game if England didn't get there, and they spoiled that for you. Was it widely known in the referee group whose names were on the final prior to the semis?
It was kind of the unspoken kind of elephant in the room, but like, you go into a World Cup and you control what you can control, and I've always said that what would the England fans, the millions of fans in England, prefer? Would they prefer the England team being in the World Cup final or Wayne Barnes being in the World Cup final?
Having seen the result, I'd rather had you, to be honest, but there you are.
But, their performance against the New Zealanders in the semi-final at Yokohama was a breathtaking performance, and they thoroughly deserved to be in the final. It was quite interesting that I got a call on the Monday from the assistant coach of England, Steve Borthwick, to say, Barnesy, look, I trained with the England team in the lead up to the World Cup, same as Jaco trained with the South African team, Nigel trains with the Welsh team, and he said, look, Barnesy, I understand that us achieving our goal means that you won't achieve your goal now. And I said, look, Stephen, delighted for you. I said, look, just one thing, make sure you go on now and win the World Cup.
Brilliant.
So once again, a coach never listens to a referee, Kirky.
Standard procedure. Look, and as George alluded to right at the beginning, at the end of the World Cup, I think 2 days after the final, you were awarded Referee of the Year. I got to ask you, I've seen the footage of you receiving the trophy. Were you a bit drunk at the dinner?
Oh, I think I've got it, Kirky.
People probably forget how much a team sport it is for us as referees. So whether it's Jerome running out in the final, whether it's Luke, Pierce, Ben O'Keefe running out for their first premiership or international matches, we all want them to do well. It's not a competition between referees. We're not competing against each other. We're trying to make each other better. And so, like, this award, like, it's fantastic, but it's very much for that team who sit over there and support me every single week. They're a wonderful bunch of people. I'm bloody proud to be part of that team.
Good on you. And it doesn't happen without you and your team as well. And thanks to all of you.
You're struggling for You're struggling to remember the names of the teammates you just spent 10 weeks with. You were drunk, weren't you?
Well, to be fair, Kirky, I think anyone who was in Yokohama to watch the England-South Africa final enjoyed themselves. This was the next day, the day after, 24 hours after the final. And you can imagine it'd been a long 24 hours. But like, I just want to say, like, in that award ceremony, you know, the player of the year was announced, the coach, the team of the year were announced, you know, but the award that everyone was waiting for, Kirky, was the referee of the year. Don't let anyone tell you any difference.
Oh my gosh. Look, I just want to, before we hand back to George, I want to ask you one question. What would you, the current Wayne Barnes, say to the young Wayne Barnes who started off at 17, if you had all that experience now? What would you say to him?
I actually, what I say to people who are starting off their international or their premiership career or their European career is, on your first game, go and have a look. Make sure you take it all in. You know, you get told it on your wedding day, don't you? You know, take in the atmosphere. You know, make sure you enjoy.
I did on both mine, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, fair point. Look, so what I would say to the young Wayne Barnes is, when you run out for your first international match at Fiji, Samoa, have a look around, take it all in. When you run out of your first World Cup game between Italy versus New Zealand down in Marseille, or when you referee your first knockout game in a World Cup, have a look around, take it all in, because those memories are what stay with you, and you know, makes my job very special, and been a privilege to be involved in. I
think stories of your retirement are very much untrue, and so on. So we see you every week in the Premiership carrying on, so it's great to see you carrying on. It's fantastic, and I think it's been a real privilege. Look, we're old mates, but it's always a privilege to talk to you, because we get new stories coming out, and they're all true. Let me tell you, they're all true. George, are you there? Because I'm going to hand back to you. Have we got any more questions you want to ask, or comments, observations, criticisms? Over to you.
I'm definitely still here. Thanks very much, guys. So yeah, loads of questions have come in, and we've only got time for a few. But
that's Barnsley's fault.
One that's come in is, who are the up and coming referees we should look out for? Who are the referees of the future? Who's kind of on their way, rocketing up the ranks?
Oh, I think we saw some at the World Cup. I think when you look down in the Southern Hemisphere, you've got some good ex-players. So Nick Berry from Australia, Ben O'Keefe and Paul Williams from New Zealand are doing extremely well. There's a young referee, Marius van der Westhuizen from Cape Town, who's doing extremely well as well. So you've got those from the south, and up north, you've got a young English referee called Luke Pearce, who was at his first World Cup. So you'll see all these names over the next 3 or 4 years.
Christoph Ridley.
You
won't have seen him yet, but he's coming up.
But he'll be coming up through the ranks. But you know, the old boys, Jerome's already retired, who refereed the last World Cup final. Nigel's still continuing as a 49-year-old. So there'll be a couple.
Yeah, he's on number 99, isn't he? He wants to get to 100, isn't he? I think.
But there'll be a few more retirements over the next couple of years, and we'll see, you know, a new batch of young, promising, you know, kind of keen and super fit referees coming through.
And that's another question: is how do you keep yourself motivated to stay fit? I mean, you know, from what I remember. From what I remember years ago to what you have to do now, I mean, it's hugely different, isn't it, really?
The fitness of the players is extraordinary, but it's some of the guys coming through now from a refereeing point of view. The referee which Kurky mentions, Christoph Ridley, is an English referee.
He's a machine.
And they run what's called a Bronco. I don't know if you have a similar test in South Africa, but you run out 60 meters and back, 40 meters and back, 20 meters and back. And that should take about a minute. You do it 5 times. So you've got to complete 5 of those in 5 minutes. Some of the top Premiership players, and I mean the top fittest players, do it in around 4:30, 4:40. Christoph Ridley has done it in 4:23. So that is a standard that I, as a 40-year-old,
You're 40.
Yeah,
Wait,
40-year-old
amazing.
aging ref has to keep up with these days. But you know, all you've got to do, the inspiration you get, you just look at some of those clips, you know, the quarterfinal in Japan, the Lions in 09, just thinking, you know, the reason why you stay fit and you're still ambitious is to be involved in games like that. Brilliant.
And yeah, I mean, and what is it that would bring a young referee into the game to be a referee? What are the best parts of being a referee?
So in my from 2006 to 2010, so my first international winner, I then went on the sevens circuit for just before that. So from 04 and 05, I was on the seven circuit, getting my name kind of known. And in 12 months, I travelled to every continent bar Antarctica as a 24, 25-year-old man. So I had a great opportunity to see the world, which I could never have dreamt of, you know, just being a bit of a student at the time. So the ability to travel, but the ability to see games and be involved in games. You know, I've been involved in some of the most kind of iconic games in rugby history. And I've seen those teams, I've seen some of the players, you know, I've got to know some of the players. And as a rugby fan, there's, you know, who wouldn't have been good enough to play, you know, a third 15 at a school. But to be involved with the likes of Sia Khaleesi, Richie McCall, Martin Johnson, you know, is a dream, really.
I wonder if they say the same thing.
It's interesting you mentioned about your honeymoon. When I was on my honeymoon, Ben Kay was there. But luckily I hadn't made any dodgy decisions against him in the run up to that. So, but it was quite interesting bumping into him. So listen, thank you so much, gents. I can tell you the shirt is now sitting at 4,000 Rand. Please keep bidding. It's going to be available to bid on until 4 p.m. tomorrow. So please don't miss this opportunity to own a special piece of Rugby World Cup history. You won't get this opportunity again. As I said before, Wayne's offered to sign it or leave it unsigned. Sweat stains can be included or excluded, completely up to you. So I don't know about you guys out in the audience today, but I've known Wayne and David for years, and just feel that to hear the stories that they tell, I think we've been really privileged to get some insight into the dressing room today. We can all watch a game, shout at the TV, ref from the sofa, but I hope that today Wayne may well have changed your mind about some of the referees and some of the decisions they have to make, and under what circumstances they can make.
Confirmed what they thought about Wayne, of course.
May well have confirmed what they thought about him before. But they're human, and that's really what today is about. We can only make decisions with the information that's put in front of us, and do the very best we can. So it leaves me just to say thank you so much to both Wayne and David for a great session today. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Judging by the messages, the amount of questions, the number of people that have been on today, thank you so much. It looks like you've all really enjoyed it. So I hope you'll join us again for some more financial services type webinars. We've got Arifa is going to be doing a webinar on offshore probate. That is running on the 22nd of September at 9:30. Please do look out for the invite for that. And then on the 29th of September, we've got Steve Backhouse. He's continuing the In the Room series with Ned Group, chatting about their best of breed investment approach. So please do join us then. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.